Hello, my name is Alison Lyons and I'm Director of Dublin UNESCO City of Literature. Every year we bring you one Dublin One book, and this year we're so happy to be featuring Leonard and Hungry Paul by Rónán Hession. I hope you've been enjoying our month of events so far, and I would urge you to please read this fantastic book if you haven't already. It's available through your local public library in e-book and e-audio formats, and of course from all good bookshops. One Dublin One Book is brought to you by Dublin City Council with kind support from the Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, Gaeltacht, Sports and Media. And you can find out more on our website, onedublinonebook.ie. And now I'd love to hand you over to your host for this evening's event, presenter, writer, arts curator and music promoter, Leagues O'Toole.
Thanks, Alison. I'm delighted to be here today chatting with Rónán Hession, aka Mumblin Deaf Ro, for this One Dublin One Book event. Hey, Rónán, how are you?
Hey, Leagues, how you doing?
I'm good. I just thought, so first of all, I'm going to explain the context that this is one of several events that Rónán is taking part in to celebrate the occasion of his debut novel, Leonard and Hungry Paul, a beautiful book, which has been chosen for this year's One Dublin One Book selection. And so firstly, congratulations on that, Rónán. It's a really beautiful thing, this whole occasion. It's like a kind of a citywide book club that everyone's involved in. And you know, I be perfectly honest, I can't think of a nicer book to be selected for this year in these sort of difficult times. It's a book about kindness and innocence, but also about grief, and in some ways it's about isolation, and so congratulations on that. I think it's really amazing it's been chosen.
Thanks, Leagues. Yeah, it's a great honor and I'm really delighted about it. I've lived in Dublin all my life, and as you say, the subject matter of the book just seems to be particularly relevant now, and it's wonderful to hear people's reactions as they read it, as they discover it or just rediscover it during the current times. So it's been a real honor, and the whole One Dublin One Book is very exciting and a real celebration of reading across the city, which is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the book was published in probably over a year ago now, and it's, you know, it's quite an acclaimed piece of work, and this event is obviously going to add a huge amount of exposure to that. So the thing that kind of struck me was that the vast majority of people who have read this book or are about to read this book or know you as an author probably aren't aware of your previous life as a songwriter, a musician known as Mumblin Deaf Ro, who was a prominent fixture in the sort of Irish underground indie DIY landscape, who released three quite acclaimed albums between 2002 and 2012. So I think what we're going to try and do today is explain a little bit about who Mumblin Deaf Ro is. So as I say, three albums in the space of a decade. Every 5 years, like clockwork, you appeared. You delivered 10 songs, and really beautiful, low-key, lo-fi, very melodic, very lyrical, very focused on the sort of beautiful magic of everyday life, and then you disappeared after the last album, which came out in 2012. What happened?
Well, I think I'd been involved in music for a long time. Like my first gig, my first live performance with a band was in February 1993. So I had been involved by the time I finished the third album, Dictionary Crimes. I'd been more or less involved in the scene for the guts of 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I got to a point where I suppose I wanted my headspace back. You know, I sort of felt that creativity takes up every little crevice in your brain, and it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of time and preparation. And having done three albums, I felt I'd expressed a lot of what I had in me, both in terms of my thinking about the world and also musically. And I misunderstood at the time that my creativity had sort of worked its way through. And what I hadn't understood was that creativity is such a part of the way you're made. You know, that your artistic perspective is as hardwired into you as your sense of humor. and you can't suddenly decide you're not going to make jokes anymore because you're too busy or because your life has changed. And I think it took me stepping away from that to appreciate where it fits into my life and to accept myself as an artistic person. I think I would have felt very self-conscious about using that type of vocabulary up until that point. But interestingly, Leonard and Hungry Paul, as you say, my musical biological clock kicked in, and I started working on it 5 years after Dictionary Crimes, 2017. And it became clear to me that I'm probably just like this, and I'll probably always do something. So it was interesting that it moved form, but I've always been in the sort of type of relationship with my creativity that I just trust it. So I've never tried to steer it, or I've never tried to use it as an extension of my personality. I've just trusted it. So that's really how I handled the change that happened.
Just an interesting thing that struck me there as you were talking, and I immediately just remembered meeting you on the Dart, or just coming off the Dart station at Pearse Street, and you were going to work in your day job. And I think it was around the time of the last album, which is Dictionary Crimes. And Dictionary Crimes was nominated for a Choice Award. It got, I mean, 2 previous albums got great reviews and great feedback, but Dictionary Crimes was Choice. I think Neither Nine had it as his album of the year. I think it might have been album of the year in one of the national newspapers. And I think I asked you, would you like to be just doing your music? You were like, oh, I'm heading into work. And I was like, would you not like to be doing your music full time? Would you like to be a full-time professional musician? You're getting a lot of exposure. And you said, no, not at all. No, I have a normal job as well. I'm happy with just this setup. So I mean, and a lot of people who obviously make great records have a similar sort of setup in their lives. But so it was never a thing where you were like, I'm going to make a go at this, and I'm going to sort of break through, and I'm going to become a full-time musician and tour and just make albums for the rest of my life.
No, it was never, and it's still not the way with writing. You know, there are a few reasons, some practical reasons in that, you know, financially it's very, very difficult. And also, if music or writing is your way of expressing yourself, but it's also how you bring home the bacon, I think that where do you go when you have a bad day at the office? And I wanted to keep it that, you know, that's a special place in my life. Also, my creativity is kind of a mysterious thing. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it does feel like you have to treat it with respect, that you don't take it for granted. You don't appropriate it as something that's personally yours entirely. And in that way, that seems to keep it fresh. Whereas when you try to hang things on it and you make demands of it, and you start building up sort of external ambitions onto it, I think it very quickly peters out. So it's like a sort of plant in your garden that you sort of, you are responsible for nurturing it, but you don't completely control it. And I've always just sort of sat with that, and I've just let, you know, it's about that sort of listening to the creativity inside you. So I always felt keeping it where it was not load bearing in my life was the healthiest way to keep the relationship alive.
Yeah. Now, Rónán, when you announced the book, that you were publishing a book in 2019, those of us who were fans and knew you as a musician, as Mumblin Deaf Ro, were delighted and not that surprised, because one of the big sort of primary factors of the music was that it was very, very lyrical, that you put a lot of work into the actual writing of the words, and that you had a great sense of, you know, writing about characters and writing about everyday detail and sort of creating these sort of portraits of people. So I'm curious as to when the actual writing of stories, books, novels, short stories, when that actually began in your life. Is that something that's going right back, you know, that worked in tandem with songwriting?
I can trace a thread back to when I was very young, when I was in primary school, in the sense that I did write a sort of adventure story, a sort of book really, with chapters, and it went, you know, it was pretty long for a 7-year-old, and my teacher got me to read it out in class, and then I would have gone to other classes and read it out, and as I did new chapters. So that's, if I were sort of writing or if a biographer were looking for a hook to start the story of the genesis of a writer, you could point to that. But in truth, the whole time I was doing music, I just wanted to be a songwriter. I didn't really have any ambition. And I'd been asked before whether, because I wrote storytelling songs, would I like to write a book? And I'd always sort of answered slightly intemperately by saying, I don't think that's a promotion. People sort of say that would be like an upgrading of your writing from song lyrics to a novel.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think they're to me, this is a form in its own right. But of course, other people could see it in a way that I couldn't. So when I always thought, well, songwriting is so much about shrinking things down. It's so much about you have so few words to work with, you so little space to create a scene and develop it and have a character. To invert that into something as expansive as a paragraph, a chapter, or a novel seemed like you were just a different polarity. So with them, when I went to write, and in 2017, it was just a natural shifting of form in the sort of creative instinct. I realized just how much I learned in songwriting that I could apply. And funny, even just playing the guitar and going back playing the songs recently, realizing that I'm still learning. I'm still learning in terms of songwriting. They were still discovering new things in the songs that I hadn't been aware of, that I'm now seeing from a writer's point of view. So I think it's a very interesting transition, and it's good when you make the transition and then still look back to kind of check.
Yeah. Will we take a trip back to 2002 debut album, Senior My Friend? You've got your guitar there, so would you play a song for us?
Sure, yeah. I'll play a song called The Hero of the Graduate, which is on the first album. And I chose this because the story of the song is about a guy who's trying to be a writer. So obviously it was on my mind back then. So here goes. I took my money, I took a year from working, left my parents' house for someplace worse, a corner apartment with windows on 2 of the 4 walls. I set to write, I muttered faith and sometimes typed, thought about a place I once tried to go. I wrote, dear editor, I know you're busy so. This is the pitch, the hero is a graduate, caught up in organized crime, married to a wrecking ball, and died as a whistleblower. The hero is a graduate, caught up in organized crime, married to a wrecking ball, and died as a whistleblower. Now I'm at a bar and I overheard this guy doesn't want his work published until he's died. I thought, oh my God, I sound like that sometimes. I wonder if a blank mind is a clear mind, is waiting creative. 'Cause sometimes the deepest and darkest of holes turns out to be well. This is the pitch, the hero is a graduate, caught up in organized crime, married to a wrecking ball, died as a whistleblower. The hero is a graduate, caught up in I swear I lost hope and threw my hat. I'm staring at the phone, it's there so black and black. I cried rain, damn it, what else are you good for? And there's a million guys just like myself, doing one thing when the heart is someplace else. And who knows, maybe they're right, and who knows, maybe I'm wrong. This is the pitch, the hero is a graduate, caught up in organized crime, married to a wrecking ball, died as a whistleblower. The hero is a graduate, caught up in organized crime, married to a wrecking ball, died as a whistleblower.
I felt pretty emotional listening to that, actually. It sounds amazing. Debut album 2002 must have been a time of enormous personal excitement for you, just putting a record out in the world.
Yeah, it was crazy because I recorded the album on a Roland VS880X, which is about the size of, an Xbox or something like that. And it was recorded just me at home with my guitar. I got some other musicians in to play other parts, piano parts, bit of bass, did a bit of drums. I had no idea what I was doing, no idea how to record and mix. And it was real childhood creativity. It was like that feeling of being in a sandpit and just playing around and just making music and writing songs. And I just felt I really wanted to capture them. And at the time, there was really the start of the independent music scene finding its feet around Dublin, where self-released music was, you could buy it in the shops. It was recorded with 500 copies, really DIY, learning as I go. And yet, the Irish Times reviewed it, or the Sunday Tribune ran, features. It was really open time. It's a good time to be making music in a small country, because it was possible. There weren't that many steps from doing something at home to it becoming part of a scene and actually being taken seriously. So very exciting. A lot of other musicians in Dublin doing the same thing, and really a brilliant scene built around the lower deck in Portobello.
Yeah.
And around the regular clubs there run by Alan Bly, and a whole host of bands were part of that.
Who in particular did you feel a kinship with as a musician?
I think at that scene I really fell in with, the Holy Ghost Fathers, who later became Spook of the 13th Lock.
Yeah.
As well as the likes of Settler, who went on to become members who were down into Groom and really were behind the whole Popical Island sort of scene. Stout as well, De Laurentiis were a big part of that. You had the Dudley Corporation, Red Deck Manifesto, Jimmy Cake, all those bands. When I think back, it was such a brilliant way to spend your time. You could easily spend your 20s quite happily, kind of just going out at the weekends and enjoying yourself. But I'm really, really proud, and I know a lot of the musicians from that scene are really proud. They have actual documented albums to kind of track their sort of 20s and early 30s.
Yeah.
And it was really a fantastic time.
Amazing. Can you draw any parallels between that part of your music career, releasing stuff independently, working on a budget, to writing your first book and finding a publisher and finding a way of promoting? What sort of parallels? I mean, the book is obviously very, very successful, but I assume there are some sort of similarities in the process.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the things I learned then are relevant to me now, both as a writer in the creative side and also in the side of hustle. You know, I think back then I was involved with a music collective, and one of my roles was to go around all the shops with the CDs, get them to stock them, you know, collect money for people, you know, deal with the people who weren't necessarily always enthusiastic in the shops, and then some people who were hugely supportive.
Yeah.
And when I came to publish the book, my ideal was to publish with a small independent publisher, because I'd seen so many people on the music scene sign to big record labels, not really treated that well, didn't last very long, and all the independent artists are still making music. Like a lot of people, Large Mound and so on, are still putting out records. Stoat still putting out records. Delorento still putting out records. And so I just felt a sort of kinship with that spirit. There's a slight, it's a punk spirit without necessarily the dress sense or the
aggression.
Yeah. But it had that sort of sense of just doing it. And when it came to sending out Leonard and Hungry Paul, actually Blue Moose were my first choice as an independent publisher, and they picked it up quite quickly. And we have a very close relationship, myself and Kevin Duffy, who runs Blue Moose. And I don't think I would have been as happy on a big publisher where it would have felt too much like, you know, you're dealing with an organization. There's no personal relationship there as much. So I feel the hustle I do now as a writer, like in terms of, like if a book club sends me a DM on Twitter and says, we're discussing your book tonight, would you be able to drop by? I'd be like, yeah, sure. You know, I'll do that. Or if a bookshop says, would you come down and would you sign some copies for me? No problem, I'll go down and do it. And I think I have that accessibility that I learned on the independent music scene, as opposed to saying, you know, talk to my agent, talk to my PR person, talk to my publisher, and I'll just be writerly sitting here in a corner. I'm really involved, everything from design a cover to, you know, the editing process, everything to do with putting it together, because I like that sort of sense that there's a spirit behind it.
Yeah. Now you're performing some songs live here for us today, which is a real treat. Can you remember the last actual gig that you played?
The last one I did was in 2014. So it would have been, you know, on the 12th, which is the big marching season.
Yeah.
North. So I never remember, is it June or July? Anyway, whichever one it is, it was that night. The poster was at the Pop Inn, organized by Popical Island. And the poster was basically a bonfire made of pallets. So I think Big Monster Love was headlining. I was before him. He was headlining the night. I was played before him, and then opening was Jeremy Jensen, who's a musician from Boise, Idaho, who plays under title The Very Most. And Jeremy he was a big fan of Popical Island, which is, for people who don't know, that it's sort of a small label that operates in Dublin. And he just said, look, I'm in Dublin. Can I play the night? And I remember showing up on the night, and Jeremy was just there talking to Cormac, who's Big Monster Love, and a few other people. And Jeremy said, hey man, you know, I didn't mean guitar or anything, you know, can I borrow your guitar? And I just sort of deadpanned and said, okay, but do you mind just playing my songs? And he just froze for a second. I just know I'm joking. But I thought that was great about the scene. You know, someone who's a fan of the scene, he's in Dublin for a few days when there's a gig on. Can I play? Yes. You know, I love that. But I remember playing that, and that was 2014. So it was a couple of years after Dictionary of Crimes when I really sort of felt, do I have it in me to do another album now? Do I have that enthusiasm? And I remember playing and I really enjoyed the night. It was a lovely, relaxed gig. It was a very sociable evening. But I sort of felt, I think I'm done with this now.
So you actually went away from that night, essentially making a decision that you were never going to play again, or that you were just going to park it for the foreseeable future? Or, I mean, what was going on in your head? You were leaving behind a big part of your life and a big platform for expression.
Yeah, and I think it's just, you just have that sense. There's a certain magic that goes behind music, and you can tell when it's not there. And I just sort of felt I could continue to do gigs, I could continue to maybe even write, but that I would be doing it just to perpetuate that idea of myself. And I said, okay, well, if this thing is leaving me, I'm just going to respectfully let it. But all that was happening, I think, really was it was being crowded out. by a lot of other things. And also I think I always struggled with the music is so much more extroverted than writing. You know, you need to project so much energy in a room. You have to carry a whole evening. One thing I liked about the financial crisis actually was all around Dublin, loads of spaces became open, like loads of galleries, for example. And so you play gigs there's no PA, no microphone. It was a bring your own bottle. So literally a gallery, which is usually it just means a square white room.
Yeah.
You'd show up, a few people would play. It was pretty much free in. People would bring their own bottles, and it was really manageable. I played some lovely gigs in the Kevin Barry room at the concert hall. I played gigs in the Bewley's Theatre. But the bigger gigs that when you're competing with a pub, I just felt I can't do that.
Yeah.
So, and I think that was that was another factor why I kind of felt I was getting too old, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we try another song? It 2007 second album, The Herring and the Brine, and Mumblin Deaf Ro is really becoming quite well known at this point. Is there a song from that album you might be able to play for us?
Yeah, there's a song. Actually, there are a few songs on that album which were always first on the team sheet, you know, when you're sort of doing a gig.
Yeah.
But one song I always liked playing, and I kind of, if I'm going back to that album, I sort of stick on more often, it's a more low-key song called The Cost of the House.
Beautiful song.
And I think it's just a simple song that really captures my headspace at that time, I think. So it's called The Cost of the House. Oh no, that idiot's on the TV again. But since I get so much joy watching my dog in the water, I will lie for hours with my fist under my chin, till the light of a long time later bleeds out the room, and so I begin. No work done, booked, planned, or started. Just a wet nephew dripping onto my carpet. Dear, dear uncle, I am broke. Come with me to the garden while I smoke. I'm only poor 'cause I paid who I owe. Always the lies, always the lies. Always the lies, always the lies. I'm stuck with a case of the either ors. He waves off down the driveway, patting his pocket, rolling his eyes, as if to say it's the last time, though the truth of the matter is I'm grateful for the distraction from this careless nephew of mine, as I turn to unloved workload with an ever more crowded and indolent mind, for red eyes reading under a lamplight, set out in 12-point single space, left justified to think that I once lit a light and hoped to leave the loneliest ghost town I ever known, and slip in the night, slip, slip, slip in the night, slip in the night, slip, slip, slip in the night, slip in the night, slip, slip, slip in the night. Instead I left my lightning in a drawer to burn ever brighter and ever more, ever brighter, ever more, ever brighter, ever more, ever brighter, ever more. I'm thinking about things on the swings and the cost of a house. So I think you can hear, there's even a beginning there, I think, of a little bit of accepting, you know, that this, you know, instead of having my lightning in a drawer to burn ever brighter and ever more, it's that a sense of the ambition may be unrealized, you know, that sort of sense I think is already in that song, that sort of sense that this is not going to ignite whatever, you know. I think partly when I look back at it, I was partly already thinking about music there.
What was informing the songs that you wrote on this record? What was going on in your life in 2007 that you felt compelled to write about?
At that stage, well, that song particularly, I was living with my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, and we were actually looking for a house, and we were renting in Clontarf, which is full of nice houses, and then looking on myhome.ie at houses that were nowhere near as nice. And having that sort of sense of wanting your life to move on, but not really knowing how to do it, not really knowing how all this works. And the Herring and the Brine, I think, has an awful lot of storytelling songs in it. You know, I think Singing My Friend had that too, but the Herring and the Brine is effectively 10 short stories. And there are preoccupations around family, around grief, around work, there is some darkness on the album as well. There is a sort of sense, like there's a song called The Drowning Man, which is where it's told from two perspectives. First of all, the guy who witnesses a guy drowning and can't help him, and then told again from the perspective of the drowning man. So you have some of the preoccupations that I think came up later in my writing. Even, you know, the song where the line "The Herring and the Brine" comes from, called "Restring the Bow," you know, is about a guy who lives a very dissolute life till everything falls apart, and then he leaves to kind of put his life and his head back together, working in a canning factory in northern Germany. There are echoes of that, I think, in my new book, Panenka. You know, that sort of sense of somebody, sometimes you sort of need to touch the bottom of a swimming pool to know how deep it is. You know what I mean? So sometimes you have to really get down there. And there's this sort of perverse sort of, on the one hand, it's very dark and it's very dangerous and pressurized. But once you've touched the bottom, you know how bad it can get. And that allows you to push off and then rise. So that sort of dynamic, I think, is in a lot of those songs.
Yeah. Can we explore a little bit about how you actually were exposed to music and what music you were exposed to? I mean, you grew up in a suburb of the north side of Dublin.
Yeah, I grew up in sort of Beaumont, Artane direction. My postcode was Artane, my parish is Beaumont, so I kind of fudged it. But yeah, I grew up there, family of 8 children. I was the 7th of 8. And my father was a postal worker. He died when I was 7. So my mother had 8 children from 5 to 19. So the house was very much a house of children. My mother worked nights as a cleaner. So we often didn't have adults in the house. It was mainly just children. So a very sort of noisy house. Even though I had all those older siblings, they weren't big music fans. So I didn't inherit, I didn't get the dividend you normally get from you get a clipper in the ear from your older brother, but he also introduces loads of cool music. That's more or less the deal, usually. But my older sister did, Kira, she did have good taste in music. So the first bands I would have loved would have been bands she liked. So the likes of the Style Council, the House Martins, the Jam, Madness, that sort of stuff. So very much British working class pop music, which is sort of my go-to in terms of taste. And then when I started getting into music myself, I would have been into, the Smiths, REM, Red House Painters. I would have got into the whole Happy Mondays, Stone Roses, all that sort of type of stuff. And that's sort of my own sort of, when I look back, I think a lot of that period, if you look at the type of British music in that period, there was like a decade or a decade and a half of very lyrical music, huge emphasis on lyric writing, whether either political or in very sort of relationship terms. There's a whole string of songwriters from the late 70s up until the early 90s where the standard of lyrics in British music was really, really good. So I think it was probably natural for me to try and think that way, or to think that, lyrics are an equal part of music. And then later, in terms of my guitar style, I realized when I was playing solo, there were a lot of singer-songwriters around. And we got to the stage where being solo was considered a genre. It was a singer-songwriter genre. So merely by being on your own, you were considered to belong to a certain sound. And I didn't feel at home in that. So I felt using the finger-picking style, and I became interested in acoustic blues. There was a really good I know a good friend of yours, Derek Nally, who passed away sadly a few years ago, was really instrumental in the Dublin Blues Festival and bringing over a lot of really great international blues musicians. And that introduced me to acoustic blues and encouraged me to go further into the likes of Mississippi John Hurt, Son House, the Reverend Gary Davis. Really interesting type of music because it's based on a piano. So in other words, the thumb plays the left hand of the piano. So I'm kind of like, that's the left hand of the piano, you sort of, and then the fingers play the right hand. You know, that sort of style. And Reverend Gary Davis, you know, people, he was really from carnival music, you know, pre-blues, that sort of type. And so I thought, well, wow, look, you instead of just strumming, you know, I hold my hand, I just can't understand, you know, you say, well, okay, I have a bass line here on my thumb, I've got an interesting melody I can do with my fingers, I can keep an interesting 45-hour long gig going with that. So that really blew up on my songwriting and gave me huge number of options. So I learned a bit about that. I used to go to lessons to a guy called Tony Mellon, who's a really good guitar player in Dublin. And I started studying that music, learning a lot more about it, but not playing blues. So I left the blues bit out of it. I kept the sort of a sort of pop sensibility and the songwriting. And that's really that's what sort of I got 3 albums out of that.
Well, we've had a song each from the first 2 albums. Dictionary Crimes came out 2012. So things like being voted album of the year in a high profile blog or a newspaper, or being nominated for an album of the year award. How did you react to those kind of things? I mean, knowing that you were making music to satisfy your own creative impulses and not necessarily having an eye on a career, definitely not having an eye on a career. What did those sort of, when you're crossing that line into the music industry a little bit, how did that feel? Did you feel uncomfortable with it? Was it a sort of a novelty, or?
I think I was really happy about those things. You know, I felt that. I think especially when you're releasing your own music, you do sort of want to feel that it has registered beyond your own. You know, it's not just your enthusiasm, it's not just your self-expression, that it is actually landing with people.
Yes.
So I felt it's a degree of validation from those. But certainly, like, when I played the Choice Music Prize show, I went, my biggest gig before that was about 200 people, and that show was like 2,000 people.
Yeah.
The full Vicar Street.
Yeah.
And I had to give a lot of thought to how I handle that, and which I still informs how I deal with, say, the success of Leonard and Hungry Paul, where, you know, I said, well, this isn't really 1 versus 2,000. It's 1 to 1 multiplied by 2,000. You know, so it's always 1 to 1. But when I was my brief exposure to the industry in that sort of excitement, kind of confirmed that it wasn't an industry that I was particularly interested in working in. Not that anything atrocious happened. It was just, I sort of feel that there's it's an industry that has a lot of creative people mixed in with non-creative people, and it's very hard to tell them apart at times. And that can be stressful if you're the kind of person who needs to know your bearings. And so for me, I remember when we played that show, we gave everyone a free download code for the album. Like, I wasn't looking to monetize the thing. It was really a question of just spreading it. That it comes through you so strongly, you sort of feel your job is to continue spreading it. You're the sort of the vector for the music. So I think it's also a sense, I think, when that album went well, and I took a real gamble with that because it's a very personal album, where the other ones are very storytelling.
Yeah.
You know, my mother had died. I revisited the death of my father in it. You know, we'd had a miscarriage, which I wrote about. I wrote about the difficulty of being a new parent. So I did sort of feel this may sort of be a kind of TMI, you know, all this sort of very personal stuff. But so when I was putting it out, I thought, okay, I may lose a lot of people here, or they may say, okay, Ro just needs to do this album for himself, but hopefully he'll get back to doing storytelling stuff next time. But actually, when I just went with it and people accepted it, that taught me a real lesson, which in writing, because Leonard and Hungry Paul is a particular type of book, Panenka is a different type of book. And I'm really drawing on what I learned from Dictionary Crimes and saying, no, you have to keep moving. You have to respond to the instinct, the impulse, and not be worried about how it will land. The more I think about it, the more I see how I've been at the same sort of thing the whole way along, really.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about that album. Is there a song that you'd like to play for us?
Yeah, I think I'll play, which is the opening song of the album, a song called Cheer Up Charlie Brown.
Great.
Which really kind of gets across, I think, the experience of being a new parent and coming to terms with it all.
Beautiful.
I never sleep the night before work starts, so I flick through the pigs on the calendar bought as a joke gift for my wife who's asleep, exhausted by the children, our little boys and me. I stand in our kitchen, catching cold through my feet, and stare at the milk in the fridge for ideas, preoccupied with work and the household depending on me. Cheer up, Charlie Brown. Your family still loves you while you're letting them down. It's like long division. There's a process to repeat. That's how routine divides the big things in life. The remainders collect as the leaves of my school night sleep. Takes emotional stamina to match all these demands, and a reservoir of love in your life. As your debt grows in its sleep, and your mirror ages round the eyes. Cheer up, Charlie Brown. Your family still loves you while you're letting them down. The house is asleep, the boys breathing easily. The universe creeps along cold but aligned as I reread the opening page. All the Russians blend into a confusing soup of names. Mostly I just sit here with a picture of my dad and his leaky old watering can, immersed in his garden by nature, a nurturing man. Cheer up, Charlie Brown. Your family still loves you while you're letting them down.
sound great.
Thanks.
How does it feel to sing those songs now?
Really emotional.
Wow.
Really emotional. It's funny. It's weird. It's almost like when the songs come from a very sort of sensitive place. It's almost like they're little capsules of the feeling as well. And whenever you crack them open and you go in, it's just, I know exactly where I was when I wrote that. When you're playing it, you're just right back there, right back in my, kitchen with that little sort of sliver of time you have to yourself when the kids are finally got to bed, and just really at your limit in terms of exhaustion and everything that goes with that. So I can really, even preparing songs and playing them today, they still contain all that.
Is this something that you do from time to time? Do you take out the guitar? Do you sing to the kids? Do you have little moments to yourself? Just revisit the songs?
To be honest with you, in preparation for this, it's probably the first time since 2014 I've really done that.
Wow.
On occasion, I would have taken it out and sort of played a bit, or the kids are just curious, but I wouldn't have sat down and sung my little heart out, in a long time. So it's interesting for me that the songs store all that, so they conserve it so efficiently. That whole feeling, and I suppose that's what creative things do. They store a lived experience in a way that nothing else can.
I was just thinking, selfishly, you've got a new book coming out this year, which will be your second book, and then you can quickly write a third book, put that out, and then return to music. 3 albums, 3 books, then back to music for another 3 albums.
Yeah, we could do different cycles. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I have in the back of my mind, the musical ideas, enough musical ideas, I think, for another record. And there is something tempting because I obviously I've written my second novel, which is coming out in May, and then I've already very strong picture of what the third book will be. It's going to be a book called Ghost Mountain. So by the time that comes out, I'll be 49, almost 50. There's almost, you could almost call half time at that stage.
Absolutely.
And it might be a nice palate cleanser. I don't know. It depends. My experience has been every time I did an album, the world of making music had changed. When I did Senior My Friend, it was really very much CDs and all that. MySpace was a big thing when I did Daring in the Brine. It was gone by the time Dictionary Crimes came around, which time it was all Bandcamp.
Yeah.
Spotify now. So the world of music has changed so much. It'd be, do you know what I really would love to do is play music with my friends again.
Yeah.
No, I would love that. And that's something that in the current environment, like there's nothing like sitting down, playing a song like that and having your closest friends play bass, second guitar and drums with you. And that sort of, the pure energy of that is just, it's something that you just don't get with books.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't really, it's not something I'm seriously planning, but I didn't think I'd be writing 4 years ago. I didn't think I'd ever write a book. So
of course,
who knows what'll happen? But it hasn't gone away completely. The music ideas are there, but I'll just see what comes.
You're too good a songwriter not to do it. If we were to squeeze in, we've had a song from each of the albums, but if we were to squeeze in one more song of your choice from 3 records, what would it be?
I think probably the song that I usually finished my shows with, or that I did for an encore on the rare occasions when that happened, was the song called Ballad of the Lonesome Ray James. It's the song that closes Senior My Friend, my first album. I wrote it when I was like, I don't know, 20, 25, maybe 24. So it's 20 years old, but it's one of those songs when it came out, I just always felt just so self-contained, and whenever I play it just feels so locked down. So also it's interesting, like in that it's kind of it's about a boxer, so it combines that sort of sport and lyrical side that is there in Penenga as well. So it's an interesting return to that.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So I'll have a go. That's okay.
Do it, yeah, yeah.
I took a shot at the champion once, but my chance came when I was still stupid and young. And the force of his trade hit me like a train. I pleaded with the fight referee, please let me lie here just a little longer. I'll surely catch my breath and then land my left. But things were worse than I'd figured then. My suffering lungs, they came to rest. The weight left my feet and they laid my body. I left my poor young widow to grieve. Broke the heart that I'd sworn to keep. And the thought of it sinks like a hole inside of me. Just before I closed my eyes, I heard a soft voice speak to me. It was a scene from my childhood. It said, your father's tired, now let him sleep. 21 years after I was born, I left my job working in a storeroom, and hoping for a break, I punched above my weight and lost my first professional fight. I just clung to the ropes and took shots to the side. This work, it might kill me, but this work provides. And I wasn't talented, but I worked hard. I beat better fighters by having a bigger heart. And I rose through the stakes on my manager's face and took a shot at the champion once. My chance came when I was still stupid and young, and the force of his trade hit me like a train. I pleaded with the fight referee, please let me lie here just a little longer. I'll surely catch my breath and then land my left. But things were worse than I'd figured then. My suffering lungs, they came to rest. The weight left my feet and they laid my body. I left my poor young widow to grieve. Broke the heart that I'd sworn to keep. And the thought of it sinks like a hole inside of me. Just before I closed my my eyes. I heard a soft voice speak to me. Was a scene from my childhood. Said your father's tired, now let him sleep.
It's I have to say it's been a real treat hearing those songs. I mean, it's been a treat talking to you, but in particular, just so lovely to hear you to sing and play again. I hope one day I get to hear you play in a room. It would be lovely. Or maybe on your next book tour, you could actually bring the guitar with you and just play in bookshops. Kind of cool. But I'm really happy that I'm happy that you want to still talk about the music, because they're three great records, and I'm happy that you're using this occasion around Leonard and Hungry Paul to talk about the music, because I think it's important. I don't think it's something that should be forgotten. So thank you so much for doing this with us today, Rónán.
Well, thanks for having me, Leagues, and as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I really enjoyed getting a chance to revisit the albums, to play again. So thanks very much. It's been a real pleasure.
Brilliant. And all three of these albums, Senior My Friend, The Herring and the Brine, Dictionary Crimes, are all available on Bandcamp. Mumblin Deaf Ro is the name of the artist. And of course, Leonard and Hungry Paul is available to borrow from all public libraries, or indeed purchase from your local bookshop. So check out onedublinonebook.ie for more events happening around the next few weeks. And thanks to everyone who's tuning into this event, joined us today. It's been really, really lovely. Thanks again, Rónán.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for listening.